Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Brent Axe here from syracuse.com, and we are live. We are here on the syracuse.com Syracuse basketball Facebook page, and we are talking brackets. We are talking March Madness. We're talking bubbles. Has the orange bubble burst, or will Syracuse hear their name called on Selection Sunday? Good news, you guys. I got in touch with the selection committee. They told me everything is, no, I don't know. I don't know really. I wish I could. I wish I could put your mind at ease and tell you that Syracuse is going to be in or out of the 2018 NCAA Tournament. If anything, it creates some drama for Selection Sunday, which is at 6 o'clock. So we're all anxiously awaiting that announcement come Sunday. But for now, all we can do is speculate. All we can do is watch other teams and hope that they win, watch other teams and hope that they lose. Feverishly, refreshed the bracket matrix and Joe Lenardi and Jerry Palm and all of these bracketologists and all the experts to see where they have the orange. So I want to know what you guys think. Please like and share this post. If you're watching us live, let people know that we're here doing the thing. Hop in that comment section, and I'll try and get to as many of your comments and your questions as we can as we go along here. But you guys get in there and hash it out and talk about this Syracuse basketball team and what you think. Because, look, if anything, what this creates, and this is the fourth year in a row this has been the case. Now, you go back to 2015, Syracuse couldn't get into the tournament by their own self-imposed ban. But 4 years in a row, the way the Syracuse basketball team has finished the regular season is where they sit today. And that is squarely on the bubble of the NCAA tournament, right? But you like our set, by the way? I found a picture of the Carrier Dome in our vast Syracuse media group headquarters here. I figured if we're going to be talking Syracuse basketball, we might as well have the Carrier Dome in the background there. And this was the Syracuse-Villanova game, the first record setter amongst many record setters there. So pretty cool little set we got going there. All right, are they in or are they out is the question. So let's look at what the bracketologists are saying at this point, and they're all over the map on this. So Joe Lenardi from ESPN, he's kind of the godfather of this bracketology stuff, right? He says they're out. Now, it should be duly noted that the last 2 years, Joe Lenardi's been dead wrong on Syracuse. Last year, he said they were in the tournament, and they didn't get in. In 2016, he said they were out, and all Syracuse did then was go to the Final Four. So Lenardi's been wrong the past couple of years. A guy who's been right about Syracuse in recent years is Jerry Palm of CBS. Jerry Palm, Chris, what's up? Good to see everybody coming in and getting their comments going here. And I'll keep doing that. You guys talk amongst yourselves, and I'll hop in and out of there while we are discussing Syracuse here. But Jerry Palm of CBS has him in. Now, here's what we're talking about, and I saw Chris note it there in the comments. If Syracuse gets in, I think we're talking about Dayton. We're talking about the play-in game. So that's a conversation in and of itself. Do you consider the play-in game, as they formally call it, the first four, to be the NCAA tournament? Because CBS and TBS and their broadcast partners and the NCAA will want you to call it that because, they frame it and package it that way, and they put all the fancy graphics on it. It looks like all the NCAA tournament sites. If you ever watched the NCAA tournament, what they've done in recent years is they make every site look the same. The court looks the same. Individual arenas have to cover up advertising and all their banners and everything in there. There's just this uniform look to where the NCAA tournament plays. So they've done that in Dayton. We consider it the play-in game, right? We consider that, okay, you're not quite there, but if you win this game, then you're in the tournament. So if you're a Syracuse fan who in the past has said, I don't consider the play-in game a tournament, you're going to this year, right? But I think that's what we're talking about because Syracuse is right on the cut line. So let's say, you're looking at somebody that has Syracuse in. Jerry Palm is an example of that at CBS. He has Syracuse on the 11 seed line playing Oklahoma today. That's in Dayton. So the winner of that game would play a 6 seed, what would likely be on Friday in the NCAA tournament or Thursday, depending on when Syracuse will play in the play-in game. Either way, see, that's the thing with Syracuse to me. They are the perfect play-in game candidate. There's some other teams that we'll discuss here and, who you're on the bubble with and whether Syracuse's resume is as good or bad as other teams. But to me, they are the perfect play-in game candidate because we have played 33 basketball games, and I think a lot of people aren't quite sure if this team's worthy of the tournament. It's almost like the play-in game, the first four, as it's formally called, was invented just for a team like Syracuse because, well, let's let you play one more game and earn your way into this thing. And I saw John in the comments there say something that I completely agree with, and that is the playing game, Dayton, Ohio. I would much rather see Syracuse go there, and even if they lost to, a USC or an Oklahoma or whoever they would play there, I would much rather see that than play in the NIT. NIT, been there, done that. Syracuse was a number 1 seed in the NIT last year. I didn't see a lot of T-shirts around town after that, right? I've seen some people say it might be better for a younger team to make the NIT and get some experience and play 3 or 4 games there. I don't buy that for a moment. I don't buy that for a moment, A, because it's the NIT. B, because, remember, this is a Syracuse team that is pretty low on depth as it is. They have had to fight, scratch, and claw their way to this point, which has been pretty admirable, frankly. And I think it's been one of Jim Boeheim's best coaching jobs that they're even in this position, given the lack of depth that they have, the injuries they occurred throughout the year, the departures they occurred throughout the year, right? So why would you push yourself with a 6 or 7 deep team in the NIT? It doesn't make sense. If you're in the NCAA tournament or the first 4 or a combination of both, well, then you deal with it, right? Because it's what you ultimately play for. So I'm not doing the NIT thing. I'll have to, right? I'll write about it and do the recap as we always do, right? But it'll feel like work in that case to watch the NIT. It's just last year you could tell their hearts weren't in it, and the NIT, it's the consolation prize. You're playing to be the 68th best team in the country at that point. So we mentioned Palm and Lenardi. If you guys are familiar with the bracket matrix, I'm sure a lot of you are, considering the position Syracuse has been in the last 4 years. But if you're not, briefly, the bracket matrix is a great website that just gathers, at this point, we're talking about 80, 85, 90 different bracketologists out there that are doing this, especially as we head down the home stretch with the Selection Sunday show coming this Sunday. So the bracket matrix goes over all of the brackets. They actually rank bracketologists based on accuracy over the last 4 or 5 years, or even longer in some cases, and they just kind of put it all together. So at this point, Syracuse is one of the first 4 out in the tournament, according to the bracket matrix. Last I checked it, Syracuse was on 25 different brackets out of about 80 that have been measured. The number 1 rated bracketologist on bracketmatrix.com is a gentleman by the name of Dave Ullman. Now, Dave has a site called Bracketville. You've seen Chris Carlson and Donna DeToda and Mike Waters do their bubble watch here on syracuse.com. And, when they cite Bracketville a lot. And I actually talked with Dave yesterday, and he had Syracuse just out of the tournament, and he still does today. So for what it's worth, the bracket matrix, which is the conglomerate of everything, has Syracuse as the first 4 out. Dave has Syracuse as one of the first 4 out. Now, here's where it gets curious to me, and I know you guys have been paying attention to this stuff, and I see Rodney say it right here. You really start becoming an expert on RPI, quadrants, strength of schedule, and you find yourself arguing about all these metrics because that's what, that's life on the bubble. You find something that gives your team an advantage, and you just ram it home in the conversation. The team that Syracuse is being kind of locked in with here, and the team that shows up in a lot of brackets over Syracuse is Louisville. And I don't understand that. When you look at their resumes, and I'll do that briefly here in a moment, they are almost exactly the same. I mean, Louisville had a better ACC record at 9-9. Syracuse was 8-10. But all things even, doesn't it come down to head-to-head? I mean, we don't really know what the selection committee will do and what they consider, the most important elements. We know some of it, right? We know what they use, RPI and the Quadrant System and KenPom ratings and strength of schedule and all these measurements that are put in front of them to try and make a decision. But how important is head-to-head? If it comes down to Syracuse or Louisville for that last spot in Dayton, Ohio, I don't understand why they would take Louisville, because let's just look at it here. Syracuse is an RPI 41. Louisville is an RPI 38. Syracuse has a KenPom rating of 53. Syracuse has a BPI, which is ESPN's kind of full gather measurement, of 51. Syracuse was 3-8 against Quadrant 1 teams. Quadrant 1, Quadrant 2, as we know, are very important in this discussion. Syracuse's overall record against Quadrant 1 and Quadrant 2 teams was 6-11. Louisville's overall record against Quadrant 1 and Quadrant 2 teams was 5-12. Now, here's a big one. Syracuse's non-conference strength of schedule is 17th in the country. Louisville's is 86th in the country. Now, here's the thing with Louisville. They don't have a bad loss on the resume. And I think you can make the case that Syracuse doesn't have a bad loss on the resume. I mean, Georgia Tech and Wake Forest in ACC play are really the two that you would point at. Syracuse won a lot more games on the road and neutral sites this year. And, if those are your two worst losses, look, the strength of schedule bears out. Syracuse's overall strength of schedule is 21. We mentioned the non-conference strength of schedule is at 17. So all things even, Syracuse is a better strength of schedule, and they beat Louisville head-to-head. So I'm not understanding why Louisville is showing up on more brackets than Syracuse. Here's another team that puzzles me. And I saw my colleagues, Donna DeToda and Mike Waters, tweet about this today. Middle Tennessee State. Middle Tennessee State's become one of these mid-major darlings. And I know talking about Middle Tennessee State rubs a Syracuse fan the wrong way these days, right? Because, the football team led by defensive coordinator Scott Schaefer came to the Carrier Dome and beat the Orange earlier this year, right? But Middle Tennessee State, or earlier last year, I should say, 24-7, 16-2 in Conference USA. They have a good RPI. They have a good non-conference strength of schedule, which is 11. Their RPI is 29. But their best win is Murray State. They have 4 what you would consider bad losses. They lost in their conference tournament to a 9 seed. They lost to Belmont, and they lost to Marshall twice. How does that scream NCAA tournament team? And I understand that, they don't have the strength of schedule that Syracuse does, or, they're not in a power conference. But why they continue to show up ahead of Syracuse with those bad losses is also something that really befuddles me. John mentions that St. Bonaventure at home was a bad loss. It's not a bad loss when you look at metrics and you look at measurements, because St. Bonaventure is probably going to be a tournament team. I would consider that to be a bad loss if St. Bonaventure wasn't even in the discussion. It's a bad loss in the sense of games you don't want to drop. You want that in your back pocket, right? So I guess it depends on how you define bad loss, but I'm defining bad loss by the metrics and the measurements and how the NCAA committee looks at this stuff. All right, so let's take a look at what you guys are saying here in the comment section, as John noted the bad loss there. And Syracuse has 3 big wins, and I see, Josh notes that, beating Miami. So here are the big wins for Syracuse. At Louisville, at Miami, Clemson. Buffalo is right on the cut line. It's a quadrant 2 win currently, but if Buffalo can get back into the top 30 of the RPI by the time Sunday rolls around, then that's a quadrant 1 win, because the way the quadrant system works is Syracuse beat them at home, and they're in between 1 and 30 in the RPI. So they're just outside. Virginia Tech got, how about that Notre Dame-Virginia Tech game the other night? Virginia Tech just melted like a snowball in the sun against Notre Dame, had a 20-point lead in that game and let it slip. But that is overall considered a good win for Syracuse. So that's what they're resting on here. And I think that's what could hurt Syracuse, is the record against the quadrant system. Now, I talked with on the Syracuse Sports Podcast this week. Hope you guys can check that out here on syracuse.com, or if you subscribe in iTunes or Google Play, you get it sent right to where you're listening to your podcast presented by the Bill Rapp Superstore plug. But check that out, because I talked to Patrick Stevens, who is a great bracketologist, really knows this stuff. And that's one thing that we talked about in the podcast was we really don't know how important the quadrant system is going to be. Another shameless plug, I did a video here on syracuse.com, which kind of explained and laid out what the quadrant system is, okay? In a nutshell, the quadrant system is a fancier way to use the RPI. The RPI used to be top 50, top 100, top 150. Now they kind of section it out a little bit more. But the basis of it is still the RPI. So about a month ago, the selection committee does this now. With about a month ago in the tournament, they kind of get you in the mood, get you thinking about it. They released their top 16 teams that are just seeded at this point, at that point, I should say. And when they interviewed the selection chair after that, I believe it was on the CBS studio show, he kept referring to the quadrant system. So I think the committee is going to use this as a very important measurement. So if that's the case, Syracuse's record against quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 teams was 6-11. If you add that up even more, quadrant 3 and quadrant 4 losses, they don't really do anything for you. If anything, wins, I should say. You don't want a loss in quadrant 4, which at this point Syracuse does not have. But those quadrant 3 and quadrant 4 wins, they kind of wash out. They're not really valuable. 14 of Syracuse's 20 wins are in quadrant 3 or quadrant 4. So how the committee looks at this is what Patrick Stevens told me the other day. We have no idea. And anybody that thinks they know how the committee is going to put the value on the quadrant system would be lying to you because it's a new measurement this year. But I think we get a little bit of a sense of it, right? Because as I mentioned, the quadrant system is just a fancy way to use the RPI. And in the past, the committees lean heavily on the RPI. Now, the committee is using new metrics, KenPom ratings, all sorts of analytics and everything. And those can lead you a different way. So during the Syracuse Wake Forest ACC tournament game the other night, somebody put out this ranking that according to the BPI, that if Syracuse beat Wake Forest, they'd be a 98% chance to get in the tournament. And I said, well, how the heck does BPI know that? Because you can't measure what 10 people in a room are going to do on a committee. So I never understood that. So you can get lost in these numbers and strength of schedule and all this stuff. But, hey, if you're a Syracuse fan, you're trying to win an argument over a team like Louisville or Middle Tennessee State, Providence, Texas, UCLA, Baylor, Oklahoma State, USC, all these teams that are kind of hovering on the bubble. That's what you're going to do. Speaking of bubble watch, this game gets going at about 1 o'clock this afternoon. You want to keep an eye on Auburn, Alabama. Usually a better football game, right? But how about Alabama? Buzzer beater win over Texas A&M. And I don't know how you leave the best player on the floor and a top 5 NBA draft pick in Colin Sexton open, but he gets the ball, goes up the court, and sinks a buzzer beater. So today, you want to root for Auburn to beat Alabama to make life a little bit easier on Syracuse because this is the position they're in now, right? They're counting on other teams to kind of eliminate themselves from the bubble. You want to keep an eye on Xavier and Providence today and root for Xavier to win that game. Kansas and Kansas State. I think Kansas State is in one way or the other, but maybe they can get a little help from Kansas there. Somebody brought up St. Bonaventure earlier. They play Richmond in the A-10 tournament today. So those are some of the key games to keep an eye on. Donna DeTota's got more on Bubble Watch on syracuse.com, so make sure you check that out, and we'll certainly be updating that as we go along here. Matt just notes it there in the comments here. Better cheer for Auburn today. Yeah, so not Roll Tide, War Eagle, if you're a Syracuse fan, from about 1 until 3 o'clock this afternoon. Steve says NIT. Sorry, Brent. It could be. I mean, they're right on the cut line. It is amazing how year after year Syracuse is the consummate bubble team. So you get listening to some national discussions and you watch the studio shows on ESPN, as we will be all weekend long in the conference tournaments. And Syracuse is going to be held up as kind of this example of a bubble team, which is noteworthy, by the way. It's noteworthy because there is a lot, not to peek over the horizon too much. Hopefully Syracuse does make the first 4 and the season goes as long as it can. But you look ahead to next year with Darius Basley coming in, with Jalen Carey coming in, Buddy Boeheim, who might end up even redshirting on this team, but we know he can shoot. Elijah Hughes, remember, is sitting on the bench as a transfer from East Carolina. Now let's assume, and it's dangerous to assume things, but let's assume that Tyus Battle doesn't go to the NBA and returns. I think O'Shea Brissett certainly comes back, and all the players back from this team. Well, all of a sudden, you go from a depleted roster that's barely scratching out 6 players on the floor to a deep roster. So that's the saving grace here. Let's say Syracuse, let's say you're right, Steve, and Syracuse is an NIT team once again. I think people will accept that fate for the most part. I think people kind of know that's what this team was. That was the expectation at the beginning of the year, that they were going to be sort of in this territory. I actually predicted that Syracuse would go 19-12 in the regular season, and like a broken clock, sometimes you get something right twice a day. A blind squirrel, there's an expression there too. Once in a while, I get a prediction right. But that's what this team felt like. So if they don't get in and they go to the NIT, I mean, that stinks. But I think everybody's looking ahead at that team coming in next year saying, whoa, that team's loaded. And that team can't be on the bubble next year, barring injury and things that are unforeseen a year from now. But I think that's the hope, that a year from now, Syracuse fans will be talking about a team that's not even on the bubble. I won't have to do this broadcast as will they be in or out. It'll be more of a, well, what kind of seat are they going to get? Where do I have to buy tickets? Am I flying? Am I driving to the tournament? Those usual conversations that Syracuse basketball fans are used to, whereas in this case, it's are they in or are they out? And by the way, anybody going to Dayton, if they make the play-in game, who's going to make the run out to Dayton? That is not that far of a drive, right? It's about 5-6 hours to Cleveland. I'm not sure what the drive to Dayton is, but I'm sure Syracuse fans will be representing if that's the case. Chris That's a question, and it's a good one. Joe Girard is a recruit in the next class, the class of 2019, but he is a great shooter, and he is a player that Syracuse is going after hard. He's from the Glens Falls area. They kind of call him Jimmer Fredette 2.0, and Jerry McNamara has been recruiting him. Joe was at the Clemson game last weekend, and, we'll see. But he doesn't come until 2019. He won't be on the roster next year. Gary notes that Syracuse is a young team. It would be more experience to play in the NIT than to go to the NCAA tournament and lose the first or the second game. See, Gary, I don't agree with that at all. You want the experience of going to the NCAA tournament, period, end of sentence. Going to the NIT is a letdown. They've played 33 games. That's a lot of games. They've played 33 games as a team that this is the team. This is it. You can't get Howard Washington Jr. back in there. He's injured. You can't get people experience that they don't otherwise have. And doing it in the NIT, to me, it's pointless. If it's one game in Dayton and out, you at least have the experience that you made the tournament. That is a much better thing than the NIT. I respect your opinion and your right to give that opinion. That befuddles me why people say this. They played 33 games. They played and won a game in a tournament. I'm getting too upset about this, but going to the NIT and going 3 or 4 deep there as opposed to even one game in the NCAA tournament, I don't get that logic. I don't. It's because think of the mind frame of the team. They don't want to be there. They want to be. They want to be in the NCAA tournament, even if that's playing game status. Stewart says it's about 8-hour drive to Dayton, Ohio. All right, well, who's in? Who's in? Road trip, baby. We're going to Dayton, hopefully, right? Jeff says, Brent, the committee cannot snub us 2 times in a year. Too big of a program. The NCAA needs the money. They've already got the money, Jeff. That's the thing. CBS is, cashing that, or the NCAA, pardon me, is cashing that check from CBS of over $1 billion with a B dollars, no matter who's in or out. So that theory doesn't hold up to me. Now, one interesting team and one interesting scenario there, money's one thing. Ratings are another, okay? Ratings are another. And remember, the people on the selection committee, when we point at the big bad NCAA, right? Yes, there's this physical structure in Indianapolis that is the NCAA. They have a president, Mark Emmert. They have people that work for them. But the NCAA is the schools. And the people on the selection committee are the NCAA. These are ADs. These are presidents. These are people that work at the NCAA, at the schools. Ratings are another thing. So what I'm wondering about is look at a player like Trey Young at Oklahoma. Oklahoma has fallen apart. Oklahoma, was one of the best teams in the country at one point, and Trey Young is one of the best players in the country and still is in a way. But he's really tailed off. Does the NCAA, right, the committee and whoever else you want to put under that umbrella, want the best player in college basketball out of the tournament for a 3rd year in a row? Because remember, Ben Simmons was at LSU. They didn't make the tournament. Markelle Fultz was at Washington last year, where Mike Hopkins took a 9-win team and made him a 20-win team, by the way, Pac-12 Coach of the Year. He didn't make the tournament last year. Do you want Trey Young out of this tournament? So, Jeff, it's not really money, it's ratings. Does Syracuse equal ratings is the question mark. Ben Trey says, I still don't understand how some project us as the next 4 out and not at least the first 4 out. I think you're right about that. And Lenardi's got Syracuse in that next 4 out category. I think Syracuse fits snugly. Let me just look at the bracket matrix as an example of this. So in the first 4 out at this point, you've got Marquette, who I think Syracuse has a much better resume than, and they lost in their conference tournament yesterday. Alabama, as we mentioned, plays Auburn today. Oklahoma State lost to, I believe, Oklahoma, or was it Kansas? They lost in their Big 12 tournament, and then there's Syracuse in the first 4 out. I think it's fine if you don't have Syracuse in firmly at this point, but once you start getting past that category, I don't understand that either. I think they have the resume to be right on the cut line at this point. Bill says, regardless of what tournament Syracuse is in, we will support them 100%. Let's go, Cuse. There you go. He's a big fan. Bill ready to cheer on his team no matter what. Coming up, NIT, NCAA tournament. We don't know. Here's a thought. Do you decline the NIT bid? I don't think they would. It has happened before. Teams have declined the NIT bid, but if you're Jim Boeheim, you're like, my team's running on fumes. Barama needs surgery. Pascal's playing on knee tendonitis. I play Tyus Battle, O'Shea Brissett, and Frank Howard, thousands of minutes this year. They lead the country in minutes, top 5. we're an exhausted basketball team, we're not in the real deal, you just say, nah, we're going to pass. You just think about it. They won't do it. They won't do it. But I don't know. I wouldn't blame them if they did. Let me put it to you that way. So, by the way, speaking of the selection show, I wanted to note this before we take off here. What do you guys think about this? So the selection show this year is 2 hours. The selection show is on TBS, not CBS, okay? Typically, like, you put on CBS, 6 o'clock, and you're ready to go. Well, this year it's on cable, and they're doing something different this year. They are going to list all the teams that are in the tournament right away. We're hearing, like, within 5-10 minutes. Like, you know you're in. Now, they're not going to lay out the entire bracket until as the show goes along here. Now, a couple things to keep in mind there. We may only be watching the show for 5 minutes, and if you don't see Syracuse's name, then, a lot of Syracuse fans are going to duck out. And by the way, we're going to be here on Facebook Live to react right after we learn Syracuse's fate one way or the other. So come on back on Sunday afternoon and vent or celebrate, either way, with really nothing in between. So they're going to list all the teams that are in and then rule out the bracket. So here's the interesting thing. Remember a couple of years ago, CBS tried this? They tried a 2-hour show. And what happened? People got frustrated because they were just stretching it out. Bracket leaked online. And in this world we live in today with social media and how you can get things out on the internet, so this bracket leaks while we're waiting, right? As Judge Smales once said in Caddyshack, we're waiting. While we're waiting for that, what happens is the bracket leaks and people verified it. It was the real bracket. So by the time it showed up on television, everybody knew. And that was the case when Syracuse went to the Final Four and got in the tournament that year. So let's hope CBS or TBS in this case plays it smart this year. And you tell us who's in, and then I would say I'll give you 20 minutes to give me the bracket. Now, I like that it's a 2-hour show because, I want to hear the analysis. I want to watch these guys. I want to see them debate and, who got in, who got out, and the seating and everything. Because when I go for college basketball knowledge, I know Charles Barkley is your first choice, right? I mean, everybody goes to Charles Barkley for college basketball analysis. But that's fine if you want to yap about it for 2 hours. But give me the goods within 20 minutes. Tell me if Syracuse is in or out and give me the bracket. And then go to town and do all your analysis. I'll flip over to ESPN anyway and hear what Jake Billis and those boys have to say. Kathy says, why TBS? Well, so a couple years ago, CBS and Turner Sports, so Turner is TBS, TNT, True TV. I always love those True TV promos during the NCAA tournament, right? This is like lizard towing and all these wacky pawn shop shows and everything. Not a big True TV viewer, but I love those promos for those shows. So TNT, TBS, True TV, and I think I'm forgetting one, made a deal with CBS to go in on the tournament itself. So as a part of that, for TBS throwing in some money to this, remember, we're talking about billions of dollars. They wanted the Final Four. They wanted the selection show. They wanted the good stuff, and they got it. So that's why TBS has the selection show this year. It's the first time, by the way, that they get it exclusively and will not be on CBS. Neil says, I'd be disappointed if we missed the tournament because I love the Qs, but I'd be even more disappointed if the decline in invitation of the NIT. Wow. Really, Neil? I wouldn't. I'd be like, man, I'm good. Don't need the NIT. No thanks.